Going on, everybody? Pops, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. And for those that aren't familiar what the heck we're doing here, this is the Life Cycles Live. We've been trying to get this episode together for like 2 weeks, but schedules were all crazy and we had to keep moving some obligations around. But yeah, this whole series is basically about the different life cycles of people and processes and assets in various industries. And for those that don't know, Charlie, this is my dad, and he is the maintenance training program manager at BMT. And BMT is a naval architecture and engineering firm in Northern Virginia. And they're an awesome company, great group of people. And Pops is one of their subject matter experts. And yeah, so Pops, I'm just glad to have you here, man.
Well, it's good to be here. I should have
Yeah,
trotted down the street to see you.
yeah, yeah. So we live like 5 houses away from each other. And so it's kind of funny because when we first thought about doing this, we were like, oh, we'll just like hang out at each other's house and have a couple beers and just go live and just shoot the breeze and hang out. But of course, we're doing this like right at the tail end of a workday. So we both had to jump in from our houses.
And sometimes that doesn't work out very well. We might forget where we are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, for those that don't know Pops, he's the reason I joined the Coast Guard. Well, he's one of the reasons I joined the Coast Guard. And most of the people that have seen the show know that I was in the service. But I joined the Coast Guard at 19 years old, and much of that was influenced by my dad and his career path. He was in the Coast Guard for 31 years.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I joined up, he was still active duty, and I was in the mix. And oh, look, we got Sonia on. Hey, Sonia.
Hi, Sonia. Finally, we meet.
And I was super stoked to be able to.
I just lost you.
Oh, are you there?
I'm there now.
Did I lose you?
I
Okay.
lost you for a minute or so there. After
Yeah.
you
Sorry
said
about
hello
that,
to
guys.
Sonia,
Shit, Sonia broke the stream.
she's a pretty
You're
important person.
Yeah, yeah. When she decides to speak, the internet will stop and listen. But yeah, so I was in the process of trying to figure out. Yeah, that's what it is. Tom. I was in the process of trying to figure out what the heck to do with myself. I had no real income, no medical insurance, anything, and I came home and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to join the service." And obviously the options were pretty small. So
Well, that's kind of part of this story. There was
yeah,
also choices were given, right? Right.
yep,
The choices given to you and your brother, after high school were college full time, go to work full time, pay rent, or join the military. So that you picked one of them. I will say I was very surprised, considering your path unto that point,
yeah,
your music career, and all the things that you wanted to do, which we fully supported. Um,
yeah.
but that was a little bit of a surprise to me. I will admit at that time. How's that? That was good, huh? That's one way to put
Yeah.
it.
So it was kind of so yeah, I was doing music for about 2 years before that, and I was in love with working on stuff because my grandfather owned a shop and my dad worked, and it's just like in our blood to be mechanics and tradesmen, and I was just enamored with the whole, like, it was a good option if I didn't stick with music, something that I was interested in. We didn't have money to go. Staying at home with your mom and dad, isn't something that's on the high list of things to do. Already out on your own, and so I was like, all right, let's see where it goes. Pops gave me some great advice. Said, look, dude, 4 years. If you love it, you can stay. If you don't, you could go. You'll have some benefits you didn't come in with, and one of those is the GI Bill. So,
Yeah.
Thank God I listened, and I stuck around for 21 years, so not a bad deal.
Yeah, I pretty much started the same way. I was going to go into it for 4 years and ended up over 30. So it works out. It is. I think some of us are put out to the call, and we do it. And it seems like our family was fully invested in that, with your brother
Yeah.
still in and serving.
Yep.
Yeah,
So yeah, for those that don't know, I do have a little brother. He's nowhere near as cool as either of us. He's okay.
That's
He's
true. He's okay. Well, now your mom's probably watching, so now I'm probably, she's down there with a scoreboard, of how much.
Yeah.
Never talk bad about the babies, even if they're in their 40s.
Yeah, and my brother joined up. I think he was in his mid-20s when he joined.
Yeah, he was right at about 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny because he was not the type, like on the weekends you could find me and Pops in the garage working on the cars, and I would be helping him with projects and stuff, and my brother would, he was too clean for that. He was going to stay showered and well dressed, and he had things to do with his friends, and he's out. And so we would give him a hard time. So when he said he wanted to join the military, I was like, really? And then he said, yeah, I want to be an electrician. I was like, yeah, okay. And then he ended up being a mechanic.
Yeah, and a darn good mechanic too. Oh, you froze up on me again.
Yeah, you froze it. But yeah, he ended up being a really good mechanic and warrant officer now, and so he's leading the way, if you will. Having already left his enlisted time, but still being as a main prop type. I hope we can get him on a ship as an MPA. That'd be pretty awesome. Especially if we go back to Tampa.
So that was
yeah,
that was two surprises. Probably the only two really surprises in my life were that the two of you joined the Coast Guard, and both very good leaders, and you both did so amazing. The funny part of that is, you guys, the one thing about the Coast Guard being 38,000 strong, or give them, plus or minus a few thousand, is you'll make your reputation very quickly, whether it's good or bad. And I think the only advice they gave you was don't ruin mine, if I remember right. I think you guys just amazed me. But what's funny about it is when I was out there still wearing the uniform, and even today, every time I would see somebody, they felt they had to give me a report on my kids and how they were doing. And I'm sure Blake's really pleased with that now, because now he gets you probably get the same thing about him. You probably get some reports on him, but the two you two had to put up with a lot, being from a family of Coast Guard, and so it's good times. It's good times. It was pretty neat to be and sail in the same couple of the same ships, the Tampa and the Gallatin. All three of us sailed, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty wild, joining the service while your dad's still in, and then being on a ship right across the pier from your old man's ship. It was pretty funny. And Hank Kosovar, who, I don't know if Hank's watching, but for all those people out there that are in the network watching right now that know Hank, he was actually on the ship. So that's how I met Hank. I was a young mechanic, and I would ride back and forth with Pops to the base, and why take two cars and you got to go in and come home at the same time, both working early, both working late. So that's how I met Hank. I was like a snot-nosed little 19-year-old, 20-year-old mechanic.
Yeah, that's when Hank the Tank ran the show. He was the chief engineer, and I was his main propulsion assistant at that time. A great ship, great crew. Of course, every ship is The crew is just amazing. Tom Moriarty, I think he's on, but he talked about a lot about that during your podcast with him. We all experienced such good times, and it's a second family. It's a second family. You spend so much time together when you really think about it. I had nearly 15 years of sea duty when you consider decommissionings and pre-commissionings, and you spend a lot of time with those folks, like it or not. And but most of the time, it's just a great experience, and I still hold the friendships that I made very dearly, and still keep in touch with a lot of those folks. On a daily basis. Of course, I'm still involved with the Coast Guard some. So there he is. Is that Hank? Oh, that's Sonia. Okay.
Yeah. Sonia's calling Hank saying, "Hey, dude, they're in here telling sea stories." So you know what? Maybe we'll do that. You got to.
Hey, I'm all about it.
You got a good Hank story that we could share with the public, or maybe something you learned from Hank.
Hank. Let me see if I can share something. Hank was I do have something. So Hank had this. Let's see if I have one here. Hank had this pocket knife that was about that big, right? And he'd have his glasses down the end of his nose, and he'd be walking around. Anytime he had his glasses down the end of his nose, and I saw the pocket knife in his hand, I was very concerned. I became very concerned because that's when he started picking at things. He'd start picking around, and then I'd be watching him from a distance. All of a sudden, I'd see, because he saw something that looked like it might have been a little weeping, and he goes and picks it, and then he just turn around and look at me, and okay, here we go, stick your finger in the hole kind of thing, and get folks down to fix it. Or is Hank on? This isn't really fair to Hank because he can't give any rebuttals.
Well, if he didn't show up for this, then it's on him that he didn't show up to defend himself.
And he didn't like it. He didn't like it when we had to give out the Prince of Darkness Award. When somebody would, so the Prince of Darkness Award, for those who don't know, is when you're on ship's power, and either one of the watchstanders make a mistake, and you're ready to single up on a generator if you're in parallel, and they secure the wrong one if there's already one off the line and ready, just cooling down, and they go to shut that generator off, but they shut the wrong one, and then all the lights go out. Hank never appreciated that too much. And then you had to know when to approach him in the stateroom. You knock on the door, walk in, and of course everything is always comical to me. So it wasn't to the EO at the time because he had to go talk to the CO. But to me, it was always fun, And then of course on that ship we had Tom Vitullo was the XO, and so just good times, But I have other Liberty stories. Good, me and Hank and I would go around and rescue crew all the time. You know how it is when you pull into ports, and if you pull in at 8 a.m, by 9 o'clock, somebody's already into having a good time. And Hank, myself, and the BMC, we used to go out and scoop folks up. We were the scoop. So Hank always. I learned a lot from Hank as far as being an EO and being a good EO, and it's much more than the equipment. We'll fix the equipment. Things break all the time. That's not an issue. We could fix that. But he gave me the freedom as the main propulsion assistant to be the EO. So I was ready when I became the chief engineer.
That's awesome.
Great guy. And Tom used to give us all kinds of parts and support that we needed. Money's the
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar, the maintenance augmentation team, shoreside, intermediate, sometimes depot maintenance execution arm for the ships. And so whatever the ship's crew can't handle because of either skills or equipment or just sheer numbers of personnel or whatever, the maintenance augmentation team at shoreside will come aboard and help the crew execute maintenance, or sometimes they'll execute the maintenance themselves and the crew will help them. So, it's a really kind of a tight relationship that the ships form with the maintenance augmentation team. So if you're in a leadership role in the engineering department on a ship, people like Tom Moriarty, who were shoreside running that maintenance augmentation team, they're kind of like your partner in crime on shore to help make sure you guys the resource to get the maintenance done properly. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really important role, especially as a support entity when you come in from long patrols and you're doing 285 days a year underway, and you need a little bit of downtime. The crew needs some
Yeah.
downtime, and that really helps out. So hey, thanks again, buddy. Thanks again there, Tom, for being there.
Yeah,
Great,
and I'm
good
trying to
people.
think. So while Tom was there, uh, Dave Forrest was on his team, and yep, there you go, Sonia. Yep, maintenance and ops working together a little bit, right? Different. We got to be careful with the word ops when we're talking about the ship, though, because there's an actual operations department, and they're the enemy. I'm just kidding.
They can be.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's pretty wild to see how that relationship supports ships. And I learned from Dave Forrest, and Dave was working for Tom, and you were across the pier, and my guys that I worked for on the ship would go over to his ship to get lessons learned or to talk about something or get some parts, and they'd come back and say, Marino, why is your dad so awesome and you're so screwed up? And we'd all laugh, and I'd say, come on, man. And they'd give time, and it was always great. That was always nice to know that, I think that you worry about your kids developing a good reputation, but could you imagine how bad it would have been for your kid if you didn't have a good reputation? I mean, I would have walked in and it'd have been like, oh, that's your old man. Sorry to hear that.
I guess I never looked at it from that perspective, but I imagine that's out there, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's
So
some people who thought that as well. So
yeah, well, I never met him. And then you've got, Tom's comment here. I forgot you had Jack Stallings working with you,
Jack
Tom.
Stallings, yeah, I think
He
he's
used
down
to,
in Florida or Alabama now, somewhere down south. I think.
is he?
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah,
Yeah.
retired in the sun.
Yeah. He used to scare me a little bit. We used to be nervous to go see Mr. Stallings about stuff. And I'm trying to remember what the senior chief's name was that was working for Jack. But yeah, good time. And look, we've got Ben Komar. He's on. Yep, talking about Dave. See, now Dave's not. I can guarantee you, Dave's not watching this.
No, is it hunting season? No, it's not hunting season yet. He might
No,
be
that's not
one.
until like November.
He's getting ready.
Right now, Dave is no doubt yelling at a computer or a phone about something that he tried to fix 20 years ago. Ah, there it is, Dobbins.
Joe Dobbins. Yep. Yep.
Yep, Joe
So many
Dobbins.
names. There's so many folks out there. I always hesitate to start mentioning people because the list is just amazing, and I just hate to forget someone when you're talking awesomeness, because there's a lot of really talented people out there, and I think if hopefully something that I've passed on to the folks that I sailed with was, you don't have to be the expert in everything. It's to know who the experts are, and seek those folks out. And you know what you have to do. You have to have a good basic knowledge of what others' responsibilities and what their profession entails, but you don't have to be that expert at everything. I think that's a lot of mistakes that folks make. They're almost to the point where they're afraid to say I don't know, and I say it every day, and I learn something every day, and I've been teaching now since I've retired, and every class right away I said, you're going to learn a lot, and so am I. I learn from everybody, but I think knowing your experts, the subject matter experts, very, very important. Very important to know those folks and not feel you have to know everything. That's and I've learned that because I can name names forever, forever. And that's from the most junior person that came on the ship, and I felt the responsibility to every one of them, to the most senior person, and I've had great. I never regretted a day of my sea time or my day in the Coast Guard. Every day that I put my uniform on was a great day. I had a great time. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'd survive today. I retired now in 2010. A lot has changed, but I managed to change along with it for those 30 years. And I read a comment yesterday that kind of bothered me, and I heard it on LinkedIn, and it said, "What happened to the people like us?" And I was like, what do you mean? What happened to the people like us? Because I'm still, if folks don't know, I teach and developed and teach a month-long port engineer class for the Coast Guard, and I also teach their corrosion courses for them. And I'm with young Coast Guard to old Coast Guard, so I teach from about the E6 level. On the CPAC class, the corrosion class is from the E3 level all the way up to junior officers. And there are equals, if not better. They're very bright, very, very bright folks, amazing people. Did I lose you?
Yeah. Your feed was breaking up.
Okay.
But yeah,
In short, the people today are equal, if not better. They're very bright. They're highly educated. They're doing amazing work. And I almost responded, but I just held back from responding, because I think that's the kids, excuse me, but the young folks today are doing amazing things in the Coast Guard. I call them kids because just about everybody's a kid to me, but
we're old enough to be your
amazing.
grandkids.
Yeah, that's true. I got
so
four
if they
of them.
complain, you just say, "At least I didn't call you my grandkid."
It is funny when
your grandkids live, they might want to be your grandkids, so you might just want to keep that to yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when Dennis and I get telling sea stories. They just can't believe some of the things that we're telling them, because it's changed in that fashion, very much so.
Yeah. I think that's for the better. I mean, in most ways, it's been for the better.
I think in most cases it probably is.
Yeah. I mean, as long as
sort of.
I won't dive into it here, but there's always a balance to strike. And if anyone, I'll tell you, I mean, I saw it at the headquarters level before I left. If there is anyone who doesn't understand that the world around the service changes and that the service is going to have to adapt to that, then they don't understand that your will. It has to change. You have to keep up. So, So speaking of subject matter expertise, I've always admired about what you've been able to do is because you were so good at so many great things. I mean, look, I always brag about like the fact that you can fix anything. So for those that don't know, Pops is like master of so many different things. It's ridiculous. There's Tom. It's electrical. Exactly. Yeah, you have the mechanics like me saying it must be electrical, and the electrician is saying that it must be mechanical. You've got this ability to deep dive in so many different areas and practice them to the right level that you do become very good in different things. One of which is corrosion prevention, and we naturally lean toward that in the maritime industry because it's such an issue for us. It's everywhere in the maritime industry, and there's still a lack of true appreciation for how much we could improve the way we maintain ships and we execute work and we invest in certain programs. And Tom felt this with the RCM implementation. It's the same thing in my eyes with corrosion prevention. It's almost like we've gotten in this habit of just like, well, we've got other means to fix that right now, and we just can't think long enough to move away from it. But it seems like some of the services are coming around a bit more on the corrosion prevention piece.
Yeah, it's slow
talk
going.
a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So just to address your earlier comment about so many things, that's what happens when you don't have money and you get married when you're a kid. And so when you get married and you're a kid, If you want to have things, you learn how to do them. So you learn how to do things, or you do without. And I'm one of those who believe you can. My dad always told me it was built by a man, right? Meaning people. A man can figure it out. So building anything, putting a tool to wood or to steel, or a wrench to an engine. And by the way, Tom, I actually went to mechanic school during high school. I went to trade school while I was in high school. And of course, I can do that my cousin Vinny thing. My father was a mechanic. His father was a mechanic. And not to mention, I'm Italian. So, bricklayers and stone masons and all those people. But to get to your point about corrosion, it's kind of I got into it really after I retired. And when we started, we were approached by the Coast Guard after I retired. BMT reached out to me, offered me a position. Great company. I've been with them since I retired. And they said, the thing I like most about BMT is if you land it, it's yours if you want it. And so I was approached by the Coast Guard, some folks that I knew, because my active duty time, I was a trainer. And then when I retired, while I was at the PDM branch chief job, I was trying to get training for folks, port engineers, as we shifted to product lines. And I just couldn't get that off the ground because there's too much stuff going on at one time, that they approached me when I retired. And so that's when I started developing the port engineer course. Part of that course, 1 week, was dedicated to corrosion. And in the initial classes, they brought in NACE. And so NACE came in to teach the class. I paid my way through and sat through the course with the class. And I sat there, and all these light bulbs just started going off. That for 30 years of my life, and I've been in every position, right, from the fireman apprentice all the way through the lieutenant commander, through all the warrant grades, senior chief to warrant to lieutenant commander when I retired. And I'm like, one thing I hate is busy work, and I hate repeat work that doesn't have to be repeated. And that's exactly what happens in the corrosion world. Nobody understands it. You only need to really grasp hold of the very basics of corrosion. So I teach different levels of corrosion courses to the very junior folks. But what upset me most, and what really got me, I call it to be a corrosion nerd, is I did it when I was a fireman, same place, same area, time and time again, doing the same work over again. So that was a waste of my time, and it was a job I hated doing. And then what bothered me even worse was, as I was going up through the ranks and the senior person, I was having my people doing that repetitive work over and over again, wasting their time. And their time is too valuable to me. And we could have done so many different things to help them. And here we are, we're doing it now. And so that really got me involved in corrosion. It got me involved in, which I always enjoyed doing, ship assessment. And so I took the ship assessment piece and I took the corrosion piece and I melded them together. And now when I teach a class, I don't care if it's the most junior person or the most senior person, I'm telling them, in your mind, you need to picture this little corrosion, cell running around your ship. It could be a plant. It could be anywhere. It really goes across the board. Now in ships, you have a whole lot of places for things to hide. And I teach them how to look in those places where corrosion likes to hide, because our ships corrode from the inside out. I also teach for, MEBA. So the merchant mariners, I go up to Baltimore. We teach, up to Maryland and teach them as well. I've taught classes for Maersk and that kind of thing. So it's not just Coast Guard, and it's not just ships. And so I've really gotten into it. One of my mentors there is a gentleman named Terry Greenfield, who was one of the first instructors. And actually, we got this off the ground was with Tom Lowry, who's now CG45 up in the Coast Guard. What an amazing career he's had. But Tom was in the first port engineer class, and we started talking about it. And I was like, man, that was it for me. I went through that NACE level 1 class, and it was just like, I got to get this out there, because my whole budget when I was PDM branch chief was probably 70% spent on corrosion. And then when two of the major cutters on the East Coast I had to put them in emergency dry dock. That year, my budget went up to about $52 million. And out of that 52 million, a good 38 million was in corrosion, correcting corrosion, hull plate systems that corroded, piping systems, all that kind of thing. So it really got me into it, and it's just something I'm very passionate about. And I love teaching the class. You know, one of the classes is 3 days, and within 3 hours, you could see the light bulbs just start lighting up. And I've had senior BOSA mates in the class at the warrant level, at the senior chief level, master chief level, and they're like, "Why don't I get this stuff earlier?" Because people just think it's normal to see corrosion on ships.
Yeah.
At ships, right? I knew I did. I walked on a ship first day, and I was like, "Wow, there's a lot of rust here." In about 3 minutes, you're over it, because that's what you think it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Ben,
I spent a lot of money on Valiant, by the way.
Yeah, Ben, that's Ben's note here. And before he gets too far away from us, I did want to say hey to Joel Mortimer. He's popped in.
I saw that.
Yeah, he's watching. And Joel was one of my supervisors when I was on that first ship, and love Joel. So Joel, thanks for hanging out with us, man. You know, you're part of the Marino family, but
absolutely
extended family.
Yeah.
you don't want to get too close.
Oh, speaking of which, one of my kids will be coming. John's coming down Sunday. He's going to be stomping in.
Oh, so, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So that's one of my kids.
Wait for him to buy the beer on his way into town. So.
Yeah, because I'm out. I'm out of beer. Where's
I've got some.
Do you have some? Good. Is Bob Latino on? Because
yeah,
we're gonna have to. He's not. Oh.
No, Bob couldn't make it today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's for Bob. I had one last cold one left, so.
There you go.
I had it just for him. But
I was going to say about the corrosion piece. For those that aren't involved in the maritime industry and are thinking about how you would relate this to your work, regardless of where you're at, what type of machinery you work with, think about the last time you included corrosion in one of your failure mode effect analyses or failure mode effect and criticality analyses. And if you didn't, how are you accounting for corrosion as a contributing factor to equipment failure? If you're not capturing it in your FAMICAs or your FAMIAs, then at least have some other way to capture it. Standalone program could be one of the ways you do that, where you have a corrosion prevention program that stands alone outside of your normal reliability planning. I do not advocate that. I don't want to confuse that recommendation for saying you should run corrosion outside of your normal maintenance and reliability plans. But if you are having a problem embedding it in that program or those programs and you want to start it, you can start it as a standalone and then slowly integrate it into those processes. Because really it has, like to your point, Pops, this is why I was bringing this up, because the amount of money you were spending on corrective maintenance to hulls was based off of corrosion as a leading cause of failure. And we don't necessarily CBM hulls like the same way we do other equipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll take a ship out of the water and do a visual inspection, or we'll do visual inspections of compartments while they're in water on quarterly assessments, or we'll do, corrosion inspections as part of the corrosion prevention program on board ships now. But back, even 10 years ago, that was kind of not happening as much. And they've, from what I saw before I left, it was getting better. Carrying those lessons learned out into industry and sharing that with other industries is huge. I just don't think it's gotten the appropriate amount of attention out there. And Tom made a comment here that CUI is a big problem in process industries.
Corrosion under installation is huge, and not only on ships. And what makes that really difficult is, of course, you can't see it, and so you have to anticipate it, and it has to be part of a program. And it took me forever to get some of my clients to understand that, and that to take sample pieces of your installation out. But you also have to know where. So I can pretty much walk. I can walk a plant. I could walk you pick the facility, and I could walk with you, and I can identify where your problems are going to be, and I've done that for shipyards. I've done that for other, all different types of factories and that kind of thing. But it has to be part of your analysis, I think, and I think it's becoming more important as we move forward, because it's so expensive to build anything. And even if you think of a plant, so there's specialties as well, which again, know what you know what you don't know. And pick your area of expertise. Obviously, mine is primarily ships, but I do understand bridges. I do understand tunnels. I do understand pipelines. And my next one of the next classes I'm going to take is a 6-day class on offshore for oil rigs and that type of thing. Very, very specialized. And of course, the issues there environmentally can be tremendous. As we know, if we have any kind of oil spill. So under installation, Tom and I were actually trying to one time get some training together. I think it was down in Florida for NASA, if I believe. And so, even the space for everything has to take corrosion. And then you think of, so corrosion and then coatings, they're hand in hand, of course.
Yep.
And so there's so many specialized coatings. And I don't even try to memorize them all, and sometimes when you go to some trainings you have to, but then as soon as you're done, you just pull the lever, because it's just so much. It just depends what you're doing. So as you move along, and I would just suggest to folks, like, I'm writing a lot of corrosion prevention processes now. That seems to be something I'm doing on a regular basis. I'm looking at a situation for folks, and it's just give us. And I'm a deck plate person. I've always been. I always will be. Bob gave me a book that I love. I'm going to do a little promotion for Bob here, but this is an excellent book right here.
Oh, yeah.
It gets to the point. It's to the point. I love it.
Yep.
And because we can take any subject and make it very complicated.
Yep.
So know your audience, know who it is, and then if you're talking to set up a program, it's a different level than the folks. If you make it too difficult for the deck plate, it's not going to get done. Mm-hmm. So it has to be understandable to whatever level you want to target, and it needs to be appropriate for that. So your analysis, they're going to use a different piece of it than the workers down on the maintenance level, who are actually going to be understanding what they're doing, that you just don't grab any bolt, nut, and washer and put them together, right? Because that can cause problems corrosion wise. And so just those simple things alone will save headaches like folks wouldn't believe. So I've been writing a lot of process, just corrosion prevention process guides for vessels and for others. And I work with some shipyards too, just helping them in their maintenance. But just sit back and watch. Just sit back and watch what's going on and help people really solve their problems. I don't try to sell a product. I never try to sell a product. I never try to sell anything. I just talk to people. And then
people want to buy solutions,
Exactly. Very good. That's exactly it.
They really don't care if you're, what the solution, they're not there to buy a program. They're there to buy a solution to their problem. And sometimes instilling like a corrosion prevention program would be the solution. That's one of the reasons why, if you look at my East profile, I almost always, list myself as the principal solution developer, because my job's not to do anything else but find a solution for that person's training need. Mm-hmm. And if we can't, then we're just not the right person for them to work with for the solution that they need. And we should be able to tell them that, part of that is not your solution. This is, but
I have no problem sending people to the right people either, because it brings me back to my other comment. You're not the expert in everything. So,
yeah. And you know what? I found this very interesting. It
might be Tom.
When I was doing my doctorate, you're in a room with all these people that are really, kind of on the bleeding edge of their industry in some way, shape, or form, whatever it is they're studying. And I found it very refreshing and eye-opening that the advisors that were in the room were grilling people on they were driving you towards simplification.
Yeah.
Because there's a natural tendency for people to try and overcomplicate something to come across as being smarter. And it's the exact opposite. The best designs, the most intelligent people can take something complex and make them simple, which is, like you and I have talked about doing this with some of the stuff we're carrying from the military out into the civilian sector, like maintenance task analysis and LoRa. One of the reasons people don't do LoRa is because A, it's very big. It seems overly complicated and cumbersome, and they're immediately turned off. They're like, oh, I can't do all that, or I don't want to try and do all that. And reality is it's really kind of simple if you just take its core functions. Corrosion prevention to me is almost an instant ROI, like immediate ROI, because you will spend far less to prevent corrosion than it will cost to fix corrosion in every instance.
Yeah, I think Captain Blackall, I don't know if you knew Captain Blackall, he made a statement one time, and he said, paint is cheaper than steel.
Yep.
Because, and it's not really the steel even the piece of steel is cheap. It's all the interferences. It's all the things you have to do to take care of that. So cutting out a piece of steel, it would be great if you could just cut the steel. But when there's cables and piping and insulation and maybe it's below the water line, maybe it's at Kellogg's and they make Rice Krispies. If I'm not making Rice Krispies today, I'm losing millions of dollars. And I can't paint that tank that the Rice Krispies go into with any kind of manufacturing going on. I can't produce food when you're blasting tanks and when you're painting tanks. So they take the industry for food takes corrosion very serious, very serious, because they have to shut down. So they're not doing any substantial work within that plant. If they have another building, okay. So, it's not just ships again. It's anything you're doing. Do you have to shut down production for corrosion? And it doesn't matter if it's the size of an eraser on a pencil. If it's a hole and that hole allows fluids to leak, whether it be seawater in a ship or if it's oil from a piece of equipment or a storage tank, you just can't have it. And that's what usually shuts you down. One small hole will shut you down. And now you have to, what do you do with all that fuel? What do you do with all that oil? What do you do with it? You have to move it, right? So it's very expensive.
Well, most of the time it's contaminated too.
Yeah, once it's contaminated, now you're really in trouble, right? You're throwing all the Rice Krispies away.
Yeah, Sonia might be running around her office right now throwing stuff because her whole life is well, not her whole life. I don't want to make it sound like Sonia doesn't have a life outside of lubrication.
Well, what happens when you find debris in oil, right? So when you have oil tested and you start finding debris, is it the tank? Is it metals coming from the tank?
One of the things I thought was interesting about our equipment was people thought that corrosion couldn't harm the inside of a piece of equipment because of the oil in it. And I'm like, hey guys, the corrosion around the equipment and on the outside of the equipment is getting in. Every time you access the sump, every time you fill it with new oil, whatever you're doing, it's you're introducing contaminants. Because you have corrosion problems, you're increasing the probability that you have contaminants. It's not just about cleanliness; it's about keeping the equipment around it, in good condition, so that it doesn't introduce a higher probability of contamination. And one of the other things I found interesting about the corrosion piece when I stepped outside of the military, because we got away from some of the more traditional equipment, is how much people think it's just a salt water and air issue, and it's actually so much more than that. Like
so much more.
How much different chemicals can cause reactions on surfaces that wouldn't have normally occurred that increases or accelerates the rate of corrosion.
It's amazing.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll give you a perfect example. So, when we look at stainless steel and we look at aluminum, and we say they're both resistant to corrosion, build everything using stainless and aluminum. And then once you start putting things together, it's called galvanic corrosion when you start putting dissimilar metals together. So just something as simple as, I'm gonna use a nut and bolt and put these two materials together because they're corrosion resistant until you put them together, right? So you have to understand chemically, atomically what you're doing to make these corrosion cells. But on a much lower level, when you get to what you're saying about with the chemicals and such, so I get calls all the time, and they're one of those. Hey, they want to paint. They want to paint the aluminum structure, because I'm always don't paint aluminum. Once you start to coat things that don't need to be coated, you cause problems if you have any impurities on that substrate before you coat it, right? So we can be causing corrosion cells. We just don't understand that. You just have to keep things clean and dry. Now, when chemicals come into the picture, what happens is let's say it's a battery area, we have batteries, and you have a spill, even a gel battery or breaks, or any of the acid gets onto aluminum, it's going to start eating the aluminum. And what most people want to do is they just want to go get water and clean things up with water or another chemical to clean the acid up. So they're starting to make these science projects on the aluminum surface. And so when they start to corrode, right away, they think it needs to be coated. Rather than just understanding that it's battery acid. So when you take water and you put it onto battery acid and you just start wiping it up, you're spreading it into a larger area. You're diluting it somewhat, but you're spreading it over a much larger area. Baking soda, right? So you have to neutralize whatever the chemical is, you have to neutralize it and remove it. So for an acid, you can use, baking soda, depending on what it is, and neutralize that. And there's usually indications when you're cleaning something, when it's finished neutralizing, it stops foaming or bubbling or, whatever it might be, whatever the chemical is. Now you have to be careful that you're not causing anything, mixing chemicals. But usually, on an acid baking soda. So I had this one client and they were like, why didn't I think of that? I said, because we just go to cleaning. We do things what we're used to doing. We tend to do that rather than just stopping a second and thinking of what we're doing.
This actually brings me to I think an often underestimated point on corrosion is the safety issues that it creates in a plant, right? We think about corrosion as being a material deficiency, the material failure, degrading material condition. But when you do that, you create safety issues, right? The obvious stuff is like flammable systems, piping for fuel systems and other caustic chemicals. You can potentially increase the probability of spillage and pipe rupture and all that kind of stuff due to corrosion, especially in like Tom was saying, if it's hidden by other things like insulation or other types of interferences where you just don't have eyes on it all the time. But could you talk a little bit about why maybe if you're not getting the traction to fix corrosion as a material concern, why you should take the approach with sponsorship in your organization of making it a safety priority?
So of course you always want to keep your record clean, right? So what does every shipyard and every company have on their billboard, on their marquee when you come in? Zero safety accidents. And,
X days since
X
Tom
many
got
days.
so crushed.
You're really proud that you went 20 days without an accident, right? So I'm working with a client right now, and this is what tends to happen often is until somebody just about gets killed, it's about production. So it's all about production until somebody's about ready to lose it or unfortunately gets hurt, perhaps permanent damage, or loses a limb or, some terrible things have happened. And that you will usually drive, it'll drive maintenance, right? It'll drive different procedures. But what was the cause? And so what I always tell folks to think of is when you're looking at any failure, was corrosion related to it, right? So if you have a structural failure of any sort, was one of your items on your check sheet should be, was it corrosion related? Because you can have metal failure, right? Have you because of the maybe it was overloaded, but was corrosion involved? I've seen people go right off the deep end looking at redesigning everything, and I look at it and I go, well, look at all the corrosion that was involved with that failure.
Maybe it wasn't a design issue. It was the fact that you didn't take care of it.
I take my UT meter in about 3 minutes. I tell them why it failed, because you had only 30% of the steel remaining. Mm-hmm. To get to your point of environmental. So corrosion itself doesn't generally cause an environmental issue with, atmospheric, but certainly when you start working it. So if you're starting to make repairs, it can be considered hot work if you have to grind, if you have to cut, of course, if you're cutting out using torches and any other mechanical means of removing it, even saws. If you're using a power saw to cut something out, and then when you get to the coating piece, are you taking now you have solvents and other things involved to repair that corrosion. If you're if you're in the gas and oil business, of course you have you mentioned the flammables. There's certainly a process for that. And then if you're in a vessel, you have to think, is the outside going to come in? We don't want to cause flooding. When you start, Hank Kosovar with his little knife, right? You start picking at things. Is it a fuel line? Nowhere to look to prevent those things from happening. Usually 45s, weld seams, 90s, and piping systems. That's where you're gonna have the most friction. So that's where the pipe's gonna wear out. Everything happens from the inside out, right? It's easy to take care of things on the outside. So I think I went off course maybe from your question a little bit, but
it's all right.
I get rolling on this stuff, right? There's that corrosion nerd coming out of me again. But it's kind of all inclusive. So when you're looking at it and when you're assessing it, you have to assess the danger that comes along with it. Not only in what the failure may be, but in the repair, that the folks that are going to try and repair it understand what they're doing when they're repairing it.
One of the things that I think is missing when you don't include a corrosion is a potential failure mode, or related to some type of failure. Let me just put it that way. Is that you're missing the fact that it's going to show up in your plant. You're going to find it in a different way than you might other failures. And in many ways, you'll find it similarly to others, like a crack or, some type of rupture in a surface. And that they're not really too concerned about, when we start talking about preventive maintenance to keep these things from happening, oftentimes if you feel it is a material defect, you're just like, well, there's only so much I can do about redesigning a COTS thing that I didn't design. You can control corrosion on the surface of that COTS thing. If you had to buy that pipe, this is what we did in the service. I mean, we bought that pipe from somebody. Now we have to take care of it. So, if it showed up in a FAMICA or FAMIA as a potential failure, and the implication of that failure is that we lose some type of functionality in the system, and that we also introduce a safety concern like flooding or fire or whatever, exposure to chemicals. Then the next question is, well, what do you do about it? Yeah. Right? Like that's always where the FAMICA is going, and the FAMIA is going, is not only on identifying a potential issue, but what are you going to do to either prevent it, mitigate it in some way? Can you do it in the design phase? Can you roll that into design? Okay, well, maybe we don't use dissimilar fasteners, guys, or maybe we don't use aluminum against steel. Maybe we don't have any influence on the design, and now it's just preventive maintenance, inspections, correct coating applications, that kind of stuff. I think it's very interesting when you start thinking about how big corrosion actually impacts the maintenance and reliability world. And we don't hear about it much. And we've actually got a question. I'm assuming this may be from Mort. I don't know. But what's the best way to prevent the corrosion under in insulation?
So you said a whole bunch of stuff that to unpack it is there's not a simple answer to that. So to answer the question about how do you prevent corrosion under insulation, that's a very broad question. So there's a lot of things what type of, there's coatings that you can use instead of insulation. And then it depends on the environment why is it to be there? Because, if you look back old school days, there was a lot of things back in the old days that doesn't apply anymore. So there's new applications out there. I would tell folks to contact coating companies at a minimum. You could pick up the phone and say, here's my situation. I have an engine room. I have a plant. I have a tank, and it operates in this environment. Okay? Because the way you handle insulation in Arizona is different the way you handle insulation and coatings under insulation and corrosion under insulation in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And to Oregon, all over the country, there's different situations. And I'm not avoiding the question. I'm just telling you it's too broad of a question to answer in a simple term, because now there's coatings that, there's coatings now you could put on in 40 mils and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Underwater body coating systems for ships. 2 coats at 20 mils and you're done. Some can be put on at 40 mils and you walk away.
For those that aren't familiar, that's a paint thickness. You measure it in mils. Yeah, a coating.
You measure in mils or microns, depending on where you're at.
And when we say coatings, it could be a paint or it could be some other type of coating system. And the other thing, Pops, is not all. It's not just that not all coating systems are made for all applications, but not all insulation is made for the same application.
That's correct too.
We saw that a lot in the Coast Guard. They were putting insulation on ships that wasn't suitable for that type of plant or that type of system.
And the fasteners. Okay, so you have so a lot of times with insulation, you have the fasteners that get tack welded to the hull or to the steel or to the bulkhead, the wall, whatever it is in your tank or on the external to a tank. And this one client, they put the wrong fasteners, and then you kind of push the insulation on it with a little retainer on the top. So I'm just kind of walking through. It wasn't even what I was there to look at. And I'm going, they're all powdery white. I walked over to one, have my little magnet in my pocket. I take my little magnet out. It's a steel tank. It's an aluminum cap. And so when aluminum corrodes, especially on steel, it gets very white and powdery. And they go, yeah, I said, you've been having trouble with these? And they go, yeah, they're popping off all over the place. That's because you have aluminum to the steel and they're sacrificial. And so they're just doing their job. They're protecting that steel. And they were like, and the insulation's falling off all over the place. So simple things like that. That's what I want. It is application specific. Absolutely. I'm looking at the comment you have there.
I'll put this one back up. I'll put this one up, and then I'll put Sonia's back on the screen.
Yeah, it's absolutely application specific.
Yes.
And I would highly suggest, if you're having a problem with different areas, and you might get someone like us to come in and we can help you assess that kind of thing, or just pick up the phone. If it's a small area, if you're finding it's plant wide or company wide, or you have issues, I'm not sure what your situation is, but somebody could come in and just take a look at that. Like, again, don't try to be the expert in everything. A lot of times you spend a whole lot more money trying to figure it out on your own, and especially if you have to stop that production. But Luke, I did want to hit something that you had brought up earlier, that I said you had a lot to unpack. There's what I like to do, and the way I approach something is, I don't design ships, I don't design buildings and tanks and all these things that we're talking about. I don't design any of that, right? I assess that, but I have to understand the design in order to assess it. Mm-hmm. And so if people put their little barriers up and go, well, that's not my thing, then you're never going to understand it. Okay, so I approach everything. I don't walk into anywhere unless I have at least the documentation for the machine, or how the machine is mounted. If it's a building I'm going into, a facility, I need to know the square footage. I want to know what the building's constructed of. And I ask them for all of those things as much as they can give me. And when I'm on the plane, or, the week before I go, I'm looking at all that stuff. In the hotel, I got things spread out on the hotel bed, and I'm checking all that out, so that when I go there, I already know in my mind what I want to go look at. Because design is everything. If I don't understand the design, I can't find your problem, right? Yeah. And now, if this is going from the beginning, and forgive me if we keep using ships, but it's probably the easiest thing. Somebody says, "Design me this ship, and here's what I need it to do." It can only be built a certain way with corrosion in mind, because eventually they have to go. It has to be structurally sound. It has to be able to handle the stresses and strains of the requirements, and has to be able to do the speed it has to do. And so it's going to determine the design. And so you have to understand the design to find the stuff. Now, I can write a corrosion prevention plan. So here we are in design. I'm writing the plan. I'm writing it up. I know what the vessel's going to be. I know what everything, and I put everything in there, how to isolate materials and metals, and this is what you need to do this. What's happening on the production floor?
Mm-hmm.
Who's watching it? You can have the best, design. You can have the best corrosion prevention plan. And if it's not followed through in the production, once something is built, you can see some of it and you can't see a lot of it. And so it is what it is from that point. Then you bought the problems, or you bought the solution. And so you can't just leave it. It all has to happen in sequence, and it has to be followed through, right down to torquing a motor to the foundation.
Yep.
You know, right down to it. And if you don't, then, and we can't be 100%. And I'm not here, saying anything's 100%. However, that happens more times than not. And then then people want to start pointing fingers. It wasn't a good prevention plan, or it wasn't a good design. No. The sequence of events didn't happen. Somewhere, something didn't get accomplished.
Well, a plan is only as good as the implementation. If you fail to apply, the plan's not going to save you.
So it brings me to my deck plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
The designers are up here. Right in here is Charlie writing your corrosion plan. Now we're down to the deck plate. If the deck plate doesn't understand it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then it's delivered. Whatever the product is, it's delivered.
And so if you're a tradesman and you're not involved in corrosion prevention and this type of stuff, the best thing you can do is become a better tradesman. The quality of your trades work has a significant impact on whether these types of issues are going to rear their ugly head on your plant. Because tradesmen that take their job seriously, and I mean, I was, they were probably sick of me saying this at the weapon engineering and weapons school in Yorktown before I retired. But at every graduation of all of our trade schools, I would say, our rating schools, I would say, hey, look, there's no such thing as a perfect technician, but there is a such thing as a quality technician. None of you will ever, there is no one that's the master at a trade. There are some people that are just exceptionally good at it. And there's other people that are not, but most of the time that is only because some people are taking the quality of their work a little more seriously than others. It may take you a little longer to get there. It may be a little more challenging for some people, but in the end, if you're a tradesperson, you can really work hard to master your craft and produce high quality work, and you'll be proud of that, right? And there's an art to that. It's not just a technical skill. There's a real art to that. And corrosion prevention is embedded in that quality. To me, it's one of those things that, you work with a good mechanic, you work with a good tribologist, you work with a good electrician. They understand how their equipment and their trades are impacted by corrosion, and they take the appropriate measures when they're working with their equipment to prevent that. So, it's something you can embed in your training as a technician, as a tradesman, to make you a better tradesman. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on. And I would just add that just remember, if you don't continue to learn, even in your area of expertise, then you're going to, cause I run into problems, things, and I'm just sitting there. I can make an assumption and I can say, I think this is it, but I'll pick up the phone and I'll call Terry Greenfield. And I had a question about bonding and pipe lengths once we start isolating different materials. And he was like, that's a darn good question.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't have the exact answer. So here's the guy. He was president of NACE at one time. Okay. Yeah. So that's where he's at. That he called one of his guys, and I got a phone call. He's the bonding guy. He's the bonding dude, and we talked for hours, and he was like, that is a kind of a unique problem. And he goes, quite frankly, I never really thought of it, because my electrical background is what made me think of it. Because I wasn't thinking, and here's your safety issue. I wasn't thinking anything about the corrosion at that point. I solved the corrosion issue, but now I'm thinking liquid running through a pipe, friction. Where's everything's always bonded. Once you start isolating different materials, you isolate it from its bond. How do you calculate the static charge of a 10-inch pipe with this fluid going through it at a certain rate and PSI and everything. I didn't have that answer, and I didn't have how do I stop the technician who goes to work on it from touching that and getting a nice little zap. He becomes the discharge point.
Yeah, or further corrosion.
Yeah. So, no assumptions. I'll drive things into the ground, which drives people crazy sometimes. But if I don't have the answer, I'm not going to just say something that I think is right, and then somebody gets hurt or you know.
I think part of that is because it's not a simple issue. Corrosion's very complex, and it's not like right in front of your face. I think don't take this as too good a compliment. But I think electricians are better at that than maybe us mechanics sometimes, because
that goes without saying.
We can see and feel the things we work on. Electricians have to just, you have to believe a little bit. You got to hit the I believe button, that thing that's going to kill you.
That's actually what I tell folks. If you don't believe that's a corrosion cell, go grab that electrical wire.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's there.
I think that, because it is such a complex discipline, it gets the same treatment that like deep supportability analysis gets, where people are just like, I don't have time to get that smart. I don't have that much time to dive into it. That's when you go hire someone that is that smart, can dive into it, does understand that world. Because one thing I learned when I was in coatings inspection school was that it's a legit forensic science. And I did not expect that when I got there.
I could tell you failure. I've been recently getting into that because, the older I get, the less, I'm still crawling bilges. I'm still on dry docks all the time. I'm still doing all that kind of thing. But it would be really cool to, I have samples in my backpack. When I'm at the airport, I forget I have them because they start pulling these hunks of rust out of my backpack. And I'm like, oh, that was something I was researching. What is it? It's sharp. So they take them sometimes because it's sharp.
By the way,
it's a weapon. I'm like, all right, it's a piece of whole plate, but go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, this comment's from Hank. Hank's the LinkedIn user.
There you go. What is it? Yes, you will drive people crazy.
He's here to defend himself.
Hey, Hank. I got you, buddy. Love him.
Well, and I hate to cut this short, guys, because I can sit here all night. I mean, it's my dad. I can hang out with him all night. We could talk all night. I love the topic. I love, obviously, you. So, hanging out with you is awesome.
Buddy.
And we're going to have this again. We're going to do this again soon. We'll talk more about corrosion. Maybe we'll talk about some other stuff too. But
cars and guitars and family, man.
That's it.
In no particular order.
So the best way to get a hold of you, Pops, is that here on LinkedIn, or like what's the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn or C Marino at bmtdp.com.
And that's BMT Designers and Planners DP.
That is correct.
Right. Okay.
Yep. bmtdp.com.
Thanks, Sonia. I appreciate that. And Tom, thank you so much. Hank, thank you so much. Sonia, thank you so much. Joel, Ben, everybody that jumped in here to contribute to the conversation and hang out with us today. We really appreciate it. And Pops, always great hanging out with you, even if it's not in the same room with a beer.
I hear you, buddy. Sunlight. It's still sunlight. We can still do that.
Yeah, that's true. I got to go do an orientation for an elementary school kid, and then I'll crash a beer with you.
Hey, I just want to thank your audience. I appreciate them. I watch your other podcasts, and it was my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Pops. And for those that don't know, these episodes are always sponsored by East Partnership. You can check us out at eastpartnership.org. We have all kinds of training solutions, and particularly if you're a manager of a maintenance and reliability program and you're curious about how to get your people and your team the training they need to succeed in asset management, reliability-centered maintenance, support analysis, all the good stuff, just give me a shout. You know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can get me at lucas@eastpartnership.org. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Pops. Appreciate you. And we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.